All right. Good evening. Namaste, Nepali श्रोताहरू. This is you are listening to Nepali USA. आजको हाम्रो प्रोग्राम एकदम स्पेशल प्रोग्राम छ. Let me invite my co-host Pooja. Pooja ji, can you hear us?
Yes, I
You're
can.
on the air.
Yes, I can hear you, Jaji. Thank you very much. नमस्कार सबैजनालाई. Good evening. फेरि पनि शनिबार आइसकेको छ. यहाँहरू सामु निकै नै राम्रो प्रस्तुति लिएर हामी उपस्थित भइसकेका छौँ र आज भने हामी सामु जयजीले भन्नुभयो चाहिँ निकै नै स्पेशल गेस्ट हुनुहुन्छ. We are here with a very special guest, Scott H. DeLisi. Mr. Scott H. DeLisi is former USA ambassador to Nepal. He has also served as ambassador to Uganda and Eritrea. He has also served as a foreign service officer in Madagascar, India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, as well as he has served as a in various postings in Washington, D.C. as well. So for us, for Nepalese, Mr. Scott H. DeLisi is a person who loves Nepal, who loves Nepalese, and he has a very special place in his heart for all of us, for Nepal and Nepalese. And he is actually very much involved in social work in Nepal, and he is executive director of an organization called Engage Nepal. And also, not only that, he's a writer too. So he has written a book called Ambassador's Dog. So we are gonna talk with him today, such a legend, and it is our honor to have you in our program, Mr. Scott H. DeLisi. Very, very welcome to our program.
Namaskar, Pooja ji and JG. It's a pleasure to be with both of you. I'm very excited to talk with you today.
Awesome, sir. So how is Virginia? Like, how is the weather there? And I saw you posting that you are in line for the vaccination. How did that go?
The vaccination, well, first of all, the weather in Virginia, it's a beautiful sunny day. It's going to maybe hit 50 degrees, so I can't complain too terribly much. A little cool, but not bad at all. And as for the vaccination, yes, I went and I had my first COVID vaccination yesterday. It went extremely well, very smoothly, minimal side effects, and I'm here with you today. So I guess, that's testament to the fact that we can all survive the process.
Awesome, sir. Yeah, we are waiting for our return when we're going to get the chance. So we are welcoming you in Radio Nepali USA. This radio station is broadcasted in Silicon Valley, and it goes to all these the people who drives around at this time, and also it gets Facebook Live when we do the regular program. So let's just start the program, sir. We have a few questions, and then we have some of the listeners' questions. So I will start with this quote. George Herbert Walker Bush said once, any definition of successful life must include the serving others. And when we look at your journey of life, you have been in a public service for more than close to 40 years. So with we will have back and forth questions. So let's start with this serving others. You have started this nonprofit called Engage Nepal, and you are also executive director right now. So could you tell us to our listeners about your Engage Nepal organization, sir?
Yeah, Engage Nepal. But before I talk about that, let me just say that this idea of service to others, Jay, this is so compelling, and it's so important, and it brings great meaning to our lives. I did not join the State Department with the idea of service in mind. I joined because I needed a job. I was a young man and I needed something to do with my life, and I was given that opportunity. But I very quickly learned that this was about service. It was about service to our nation. And it was about service to a set of values that we believe in as Americans, as individuals, and about the world that we seek to create, that we want to live in, and that we want to leave to our children and to our grandchildren. And so when I retired from the State Department, that sense of service that had come to mean so much to me over 35 years of full-time service with the Department of State, I realized needed to be part of my life in this next part of my journey. And so I had the opportunity to lead Engage Nepal. And it is, once again, an organization that is committed to partnership with the people of Nepal, where we hope to help create a future that people will face with hope and optimism rather than fear. And it stemmed from the earthquakes. And when I had been ambassador in Nepal, we had focused so very much on preparing for the quake that we knew was inevitable. And we know another one will come someday. Nepal is seismically prone and very vulnerable. So we learned that this effort to prepare, to take the steps now to save lives later truly mattered. And so we committed ourselves to that. And this was something that I had done as ambassador, but that we have now continued with Engage Nepal. But I will add that although Engage Nepal began with the idea of the need to respond to the challenges posed by seismic vulnerability, we quickly realized it wasn't enough to focus on building a safe house or a strong school. There was so much vulnerability in communities, vulnerability that was a result of lack of access to healthcare, lack of access to education, lack of access to opportunity, to livelihoods, that all of these things needed to be part of what we did. And listen, we're a small organization. I have no pretense that we're going to transform Nepal's future. But if we can touch at least some lives, if we can make a difference, if we save the life of one infant who's severely malnourished, we've saved a life. And that in and of itself was worth the journey. And we do this all the time. And we may be small, but the programs really do have an impact on the people whose lives we touch, on the partnerships that we build. And I like to believe that we provide models that can be a catalyst, that can be transformational as we look to the future. And if we can do a good program in one village that transforms the life and the possibilities for the people of that village, the people in the surrounding villages look too, and they say, oh, look what they did. We could do that, and they can. And this is the thing. So we build where we can, we make an impact where we can, we engage Nepal. That's who we are, it's what we do.
Awesome, sir. So that's wonderful starting. So I was doing a little bit, research about before this interview. So you went to Nepal in 1982, and then again you went to 1980. Is that correct, sir?
My first time in Nepal was in 1982. I was a young Foreign Service officer serving in what was then Bombay, now Mumbai, India. And I had an opportunity to travel to Nepal with my wife and my small son. And we went up for the first time to see Nepal. Yes.
That's wonderful. So then you again went to Nepal as ambassador of the United States to Nepal. That was 2010 till 2012. Is that correct?
That was 2010 to 2012. There were several trips to Nepal in between in that time frame, Jay. And I had been the Nepal desk officer in the State Department as well from 1980, I think it was 1984 to 1986, something like that. And I had the opportunity to travel to Nepal. Then when I was desk officer, I traveled to Nepal again some years later. But whether I was traveling to Nepal every year or not, Nepal continued to be very much in my heart.
Wow, that's awesome. Sir, you have traveled Nepal more than me. I have been in the US last 20 years and maybe hardly have gone a couple of times. So that's really, really wonderful, journey. So would you elaborate about this segment is called What is Your Story? So could you also share your memories about your schooling? Where did you grow up? And how did you get into the State Department?
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota. I was just like everybody else, a nice kid from the Midwest. Those good Midwestern values, and I like to talk about them because they really do matter, and they shaped my service. And all of us decide who we're going to be, how we will serve, how we'll engage the world. And for me, those roots in the Midwest and some of those fundamental values of treating people with respect and dignity and just being being a good person, I guess. The things that my folks drilled into me as a boy, stayed with me throughout. So those roots in St. Paul mattered. And I never grew up saying, oh, I'm going to travel the world. I'm going to be a diplomat or anything else. It was the farthest thing from my mind. Didn't know anything about the Foreign Service. But I went to university. I started university in 1971. And it was the tail end of the Vietnam War era. And the campus was still unsettled. Our society was still unsettled, much as we are today in some ways. And I wasn't sure why I was there at school. So I quit school for a while. And I went and I worked. I worked with my dad. We had a business. We were involved in the wholesale produce industry. So I worked with my dad, and it was a great experience. And I learned a lot. But somewhere along the line, a few years later, I traveled for the first time to Europe. Young kid, backpack, the Ural Pass, spent some weeks exploring. And I said, my gosh, there's this huge world out here. There's so much more. And so I came back and I thought maybe it's time to go back to school. And my father supported me in that choice, and I did. I ended up, after waltzing through the humanities, the philosophy and literature and this and that, I ended up as a student of diplomatic history because I had a professor who made it come alive, who showed you the impact that individuals can have on the course of the world and in relations between nations and how much this mattered. And I was intrigued, and I thought, how do you get to be a diplomat? But this was the 70s, and it was Minnesota, and nobody had a clue. And there was no internet. I couldn't ask Siri. I couldn't ask Alexa. I couldn't go, hey, Google, tell me all about this. So I wandered a bit. And I kind of thought, you must have to know somebody. But a few years later, when I was in law school, and I realized the legal education was great, but I didn't necessarily want to be a lawyer. I happened to be given one day by a fellow a Wall Street Journal. I said, there's a great article. I don't remember what the article was, but I flipped to the want ads because I thought I'd better see what lawyers are doing in the real world. I need a job sooner or later. And there was an ad about this big. And it said, the US Department of State announces the examination for the Foreign Service. And I looked at that and I said, you take a test? Heck, I do tests. Yeah, I was a professional student by then. I got in right under the deadline. I took the examination and I passed. And I made it through all the various steps in the process. And 20,000 of us started out on that journey. 200 of us got an offer. And I've got to say, it was hard to get into. And I didn't know what I was getting into, but it was one of those things where you say, it's such an opportunity. I've got to at least try. So we did. So in 1981, we packed up, went off to Washington, D.C. I joined the Foreign Service without really knowing exactly what it was I was about to do. And I never looked back. And after 35 years of service, I would tell you, I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. It was that not only that opportunity to serve that, as I told you earlier, really did come to be defining for me. It did give life purpose and it mattered. But that opportunity to see the world, to experience different cultures, to meet this tremendous array of people, to have one experience after another, and to work as well in the State Department with a group of colleagues who were just exceptional. Man, you can't ask for too much more than that. I was blessed. I was very fortunate. So that's kind of how it all came about, though. It was karma. It was meant to be. Everything fell into place. It wasn't my plan, but it was someone's plan, I guess.
So looking at your story of your life, sir, looked like you were born in a past life in Nepal. So
it may be. I don't. I don't rule these things out.
Yeah. So, like Jesse just said, like maybe you were born in past life in Nepal. I had that a question actually. You did serve in different countries, right?
Sure.
But why you have such a special heart in Nepal? Like why did you gravitate so much towards Nepal and Nepalese people? what did you find? What is like different for
Well, I will tell you honestly, and I hope none of my friends in Uganda or Botswana or many of these other countries are listening today. My wife and I enjoyed every country we served in. And there are always things that you learn and that you value and that you appreciate. But I think both of us would say, even if I had never considered doing something like Engage Nepal, we both would have said that Nepal was perhaps our best experience, our best posting in the Foreign Service. And I've answered this question oftentimes, and I always answer it the same way because it's true. Yeah, Nepal, it's a beautiful country. Yes, it really is. It's a gorgeous country. So physically, there's much that appeals to the eye and the senses. We say, oh, what a gorgeous place. And it's a fascinating country with this tremendously rich array of culturally diverse communities. And if you study and look at each community, you find something to learn from each one. And you say, this is intellectually stimulating and wow, it's just fascinating. And so it's a treat for the mind as well. But at the end of the day, it's the people of Nepal. We found in the people of Nepal a community of people whose generosity of spirit, whose fundamental decency, whose compassion, whose ability to relate to each other. And listen, I know Nepal, yes, are there challenges? Of course there are, but overall as a society, we found the people of Nepal to be Nepal's great secret weapon. And it's not such a secret though. Anyone who goes there comes away struck by the decency of these people, about that generosity of spirit, that kindness. I can remember as a young officer, when I went back as the Nepal desk officer years ago, and we were in a village down in the Terai, and people were poor. There's no question about it. But of course they had to invite you. You had to sit and have dal bhat. They would share anything with you. I mean, there was never a moment's hesitation. And I think there's something about perhaps the Himalayan mountain cultures. And I know Nepal has many different cultures, but this land where you have Hinduism and Buddhism have come together to create an ethos within the society that is truly different and that touches us and inspires us. And so for all these reasons, though, Nepal just captured my imagination, but more than my imagination, it captured my heart. And the same is true for my wife. So in today's world, when you retire and you say, what can I do? How can I remain engaged and continue to serve? And there are plenty of ways you can do it. Plenty of ways every one of us can engage and serve no matter where we are. But I was fortunate because I had been an ambassador to Nepal. I had perhaps a unique platform or a unique opportunity to help lead an organization that cared about Nepal. And so the chance to do this was just something that, again, I think it was meant to be. Karma plays a big role in people's lives, and there are certain things that come about in a natural order of things, if you will. And I think that this is one of those things for me. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity to remain engaged with the people of Nepal and to try to make a difference.
Today, many of the listeners are listening your story. Definitely will be very thankful for, we Nepalese actually are very thankful for you and your service and the love for Nepal. As Pooja I was mentioning earlier, sir, what is Pooja? Do you love dogs? Do you want to ask this question to His Excellency?
Sure. But before that, like you said, Ajayji, yes, of course, our listeners can learn a lot from his life story. And also, one of the lessons I learned by what Mr. DeLisi said is, you need to take a step. I mean, he took that step to take that test, and that led to where he is now, right? So it's just like in our life, we need to take chances. We need to just go for it, and then we will only know what life holds for us. If we take one step, then life guides us through the several steps forward. So that is very, very much a, encouraging story. Thank you very much for that, Mr. DeLisi. And yes, of course, I do want to ask about your book. And like I mentioned in the beginning of the program, you are a writer too, and you have written a book called Ambassador's Dog. So, if you can give a little bit of, information about the book,
Sure.
and where our listeners can get that book, and all that information. Yes.
Well, first of all, to be honest with you, I didn't write the book wrote itself. This was a story that was meant to be told. And so I'll give you a little background, but I will just say to you, and to follow up on your comment, Pooja, the story itself is a reminder of the wonders that await us in the world, if only our hearts and our eyes are open to seeing them. Because you never know what you will encounter when you set your foot upon that path. And it's that willingness to put your foot upon the path, though, that's where the journey begins. And you don't know what awaits you. And for me, I would put my foot upon a path, on a journey, on a trek. We were trekking to Lomantang in Upper Mustang, the ancient walled city. And one morning on the trek, and sadly, my wife, unfortunately, on this trek, she got altitude sickness and had to go back down. So she left me to my own devices, which is never a good thing, probably. But we set off one morning from Sarang, up in Upper Mustang, and we were on our way to the Logegar Monastery. And as you know, this is high. We're 12,000 feet, and we're trekking along. And we reached a small village called Chokre, right at the foot of the Logegar Monastery. And I was a little ahead of the rest of the group with one or two other colleagues. And so I was thinking, this is a lot of work. So I said, let's catch our breath. And we paused for a moment. And when we paused, I looked, and there on the hillside, sitting on the side of the hill, was a puppy. And this puppy had these penetrating blue eyes. And this puppy was this dusky colored, like the color of the soil of Mustang, as if the wind had blown him and covered him in the dust of the land. And I went up to this puppy, and the puppy looked at me with his blue eyes, and he said, Dai, come here. So of course I did. It's only polite, right? Yeah, the puppy had greeted me politely. I sat down next to him. He jumped on my lap, and he put his paws up here on my shoulders. And he licked me on the cheek, and he looked me in the eye, and he said, Dai, you do not know this, but I am your dog. I said, you may be right. He said, I am. And this is where it began. This is the essence. Now, people, my grandchildren often tell me, Papa, you know that puppies can't really talk. And I say, I have to tell them, I love you very much, but you're wrong. Puppies can speak. We just have to know how to listen. And this is the essence. The story of the ambassador's dog is the story of this puppy that had been abandoned in Upper Mustang as a very, very tiny pup, and had been found by a kid from the village. And the puppy had a dream, and it knew that there was a future for it. And it entrusted its dreams to those winds that blow across the plateau, or that blow the prayers from the prayer flags and carry them to their destinations. Those winds carried that puppy's dream as well, and they carried it to me. And we were meant to come together, I think. And this puppy is now part of my life. He's right in my back. I can see him. If I look out my window here, I can see him in the backyard at the moment. He's enjoying the cool weather. He's a Bote Kuker. He's a Tibetan Mastiff. He's a dog of the mountains. He's a dog of Nepal, and he is now a dog of Virginia as well, who has traveled with me to Uganda, who has seen the world. He's part of our family, part of our pack. And the story, it's a short story. It's a short book with beautiful illustrations that are done by another artist, here in Virginia, but a woman, Jane Lillian Vance, who knows Nepal well, who loves Nepal deeply, who understands Buddhism and Hinduism, and whose connections run so deep, and her illustrations are incredibly rich. And people who have seen the book have fallen in love with the illustrations. I think that they have fallen in love with the story of this puppy with no name and no home, whose life changed because he had a dream too. And as I say, it's a story of hope. It's a story of joy. And it's a story, again, of the wonders that await us in the world if we're open to seeing them. And I think it's a story that's needed at a time like this. I didn't plan it, to release this book in the midst of a horrible pandemic and a time of great turmoil, but that's the way it worked out. My wife encouraged me for years. She said, "You've got to tell this story. You've got to write this down." And finally we did. And the book is, we're proud of the book. As I say, it's a work of love. It was published in Nepal, I will add, so we maintain that.
So many
Nepali
listeners
connection.
can buy this. Yeah.
Pardon?
So many listeners can buy this book. You have published in Amazon.
It was published in Nepal. It's available in Nepal through Vajra Books in Tamil, and here in the U.S. it can be purchased on Amazon. Or you can just do a search for The Ambassador's Dog. We also have a Shopify store. If you don't want to use Amazon, you can order it at our Shopify store as well. But Amazon's easiest for most people, and you'll find it on Amazon. It's a great story. Anyway, and we're very proud of it, and it's a beautiful book. It was really well done. It was printed in India because we could get slightly better paper and slightly better ink. So it's museum quality ink. It's a silk wrapped cover. It's nice. It really is. And it was a work of love. It was a lot of fun to do.
Wow. It's
absolutely.
the way,
Pooja,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Pooja, so can you also mention our listeners so about this book again? We can talk about it, like how they can purchase, and this will be awesome. We
Sure.
want to actually, I want to buy this one. I feel like the story.
I'm a dog person as well, and I do have. I just adopted a puppy during this stay in home period, like COVID time. And actually, this is a perfect timing, Mr. DeLisi, because a lot of people are feeling kind of, the need of having a pet in their house during this time, and the way you have explained just by words right now, it feels so emotional, and a lot of emotions involved in that story. So I'm definitely very much eager to buy the book and read it.
You'll cry. I promise you, you'll cry at some point. You tell me if you read the book and don't cry, you let me know.
Sure. Of course. So to all our listeners, if you want to read Mr. DeLisi's book, Ambassador's Dog, you guys can buy it online in Amazon, Amazon.com, right? So do they get it in any bookstores as well?
So far we have not, because we work with a Nepali publisher, they don't have the same connections to these book distribution networks. So we're learning how to get it into the bookstores. There's one bookstore in California, in Riverside, California, that is selling the book. Downtown Books in Riverside, California does have a supply of them on hand. We're reaching out to some other independent booksellers as well. And that's another part of the journey, right? At each stage in our life, we learn new things. Now I'm learning about the book business, about marketing, about sales, about all these good things. And it's quite an experience.
Yes.
So I would like to make a quick comment here. So that America, we have more than 45 million dog, pet lovers, especially dog lovers. And so do in Nepal. In Nepal, we, that probably we have this festival called Kukur Puja.
Oh, yes.
But this is we are so close to the dog in our, so I'm really glad that a lot of listeners will enjoy this topic today.
Jay, if you look at my Facebook page and go back a month or so, you will see the pictures of Kukur Puja at our house with our dogs. And we have 4 dogs and they're wearing their garlands. They have their tika. When we lived in Nepal, and even before I adopted this dog, before Loki came into my life, we still had a couple other dogs, and we would celebrate Kukur Puja, and our dogs would look at us and say, finally, this is the way it should be. The dogs were sadder to leave Nepal than I was. Because they said, but it's very good. People here understand us. So it was great.
Yes, so along that line, actually, Mr. DeLisi, I would like to ask you. So yes, Nepal has many different culture, which is very much different from rest of the world as well.
Mhm.
So while you were in Nepal, do you remember a moment like where you were kind of like surprised, or you had kind of like cultural shock uh, when you first went to Nepal, and there's something that you can never forget?
You know, having traveled so much in the world, you're used to, you understand that you will have these moments of great cultural diversity and difference. But I think that I remember on my first trip to Nepal, Nepal in 1982 was a very different place than it is today. And Kathmandu was a very different city. And we would ride bicycles through the streets. And it was very peaceful. And you didn't have all the motorcycles, you didn't have the noise, you didn't have the chaos. And at every turn, to come across a temple, a shrine, to realize the role that the gods played in people's lives. Not just that they were so integrated into the way people lived. Yeah, you were just watching all of this and just amazed as someone would go by the Hanuman shrine and they'd ring the bell and they'd do their namaskars. And yeah, it was very impressive. But we went out to Swayambhu. And in those days, Swayambhu was still in the countryside, right? It hadn't been built up. In this beautiful temple, surrounded by fields of paddy. And you looked out and there was a degree of peace and tranquility. And you knew that that this was a special place. And so there are moments like this all the time. Another one for us is Bodhanath Stupa. And yeah, Bodha can be bustling and crazy and all sorts of people, but it is a place of power. It's a place of tremendous beauty. Yeah, to me, I see great beauty there. But there's a spiritual sense about a place like Bodhanath that is just so striking and so powerful. Every time I go to Nepal, we have to go to Bodha. It renews us. It inspires us. And I think there are so many places like this in Nepal, so many unexpected moments. Again, yeah, it's always about the unexpected and being open to seeing it and experiencing it. And it's those moments too, though, when you're on a trail in Upper Mustan or in Solukhumbu, and suddenly a valley opens before you, or you see the mountain peaks, and you see the prayer flags blowing in the wind, and you feel connected to the world around you in a way that transcends, the day to day. And it's a special place. I don't know why it's easier to make these connections sometimes in a place like Nepal. It really is. And I talk about how being up on the plateau, up on the Tibetan plateau, where that line between what we know and what we feel starts to blur. Mm-hmm. And everything seems possible. And there are moments of magic that come from this.
Wow. You have such a special way to put your experience in with words. No wonder you're a writer. I mean, like the way you explain is just like, I was like, wow, I know, like I'm from that country.
I feel that His Excellency is not only the great writer. He's a very good storyteller. Mm-hmm. I feel that he has come from this Hollywood, studying the drama. This is like,
I have to tell you, so good. One of the things that I've always told people is diplomats essentially are storytellers. We're storytellers and we're salespeople as well. We're selling a vision of the world we believe in. We're selling a vision of the values that we are committed to. We're selling our understanding of America and our role in the world. But to sell that, we have to tell the story. And everybody loves a good story, right? So we have to be good storytellers to be effective in our roles.
Absolutely. So that brings me the very right time to ask another set of questions.
Sure.
So, sir, you have served in foreign service for a long time, and you have served in State Department for many roles in different countries. Also, you are served in South Asia. So, what is a core center vision and policy of American foreign policy? Because I think that I have traveled many countries too. I lived many places, and I see that most of the time American foreign policy people get misunderstood, and they think differently. Which is, could you explain to our listeners what is the core of the American foreign policy?
You know, Jay, that's probably a college course, and I'm not sure I'm qualified to teach it. I will tell you that from administration to administration, obviously things change, right? I mean, we'll have different priorities. We'll decide that we're going to engage the world slightly differently. And I will be candid in saying that the past administration's view of the world and America's role in it was unlike any that I had experienced amongst all the other administrations I served. And I've served under Republican presidents and Democratic presidents. I've been ambassador for Republican president and Democratic presidents. It doesn't matter to us. We all serve America. But to me, although the nuances of our policy might change, during my tenure at least, which ran up to 2015, before the Trump administration. So during my years in service, certain core values remained clear no matter who was in power. We respected, we cared about human rights. We cared about democracy. We believed that the world would be better if people's voices are heard, if everyone is treated with respect and dignity, if we all have the opportunity to participate equally in our societies. We believed that there was an obligation to build a world based on a rule of law and on order and on a structure, that it wasn't just about how much power you could wield or how many tanks you had, but about principles and about beliefs, fundamental beliefs. And yeah, a lot of this gets twisted around. And sometimes no nation is always perfect in acting upon our principles and beliefs. And sometimes our interests dictate one course of action and our principles might dictate another. And these are inherent tensions that we always deal with. And that's just the way the world is. But knowing who you are and what you stand for and what your core beliefs and values are does matter. And I will tell you, for example, in a country like Uganda, the Chinese were active there, the Russians, everybody would be active. But I did not see the Chinese worrying about the children who were malnourished and suffering from stunting and engaging in health programs to make a difference. I didn't see them leading initiatives to save the lives of mothers in childbirth, because too many women were dying in childbirth. We're dying on a day that should have been a day of joy, but we cared. The United States cared. We led the effort across the world to fight the scourge of HIV/AIDS. A disease that was threatening, it was an existential threat to many of these African nations. And we invested countless dollars and countless hours and so much energy in trying to bring the ravages of this disease under control. That says something about who we are and the essence of foreign policy. And people do. We want to define our foreign policy. There'll be the issue of the day, whether it's Afghanistan or Iraq. Should we have done this? Should we have done that? And it becomes a huge debate and we take our sides. But that's not the essence of our foreign policy. The essence of our foreign policy to me is what we do every day in every country around the world that doesn't make the headlines, but every day we are saving lives. We are engaging people. We are making a difference. We are standing up for those who have no one to stand for them. We speak for those who don't have a voice. We care about the kind of world that we live in. We don't care just about what's good for America. We care more broadly about what's good for all of us. Do we care about what's important for America? Of course we do. And our job as diplomats, the first order of business is to advance the interests of the United States of America. That's our primary mission, to protect our citizens, to advance our interests. But it's a question of how do we define our interests? And I believe our interests are best defined when we are also respecting our values, when we are letting our values guide us in understanding how to look at our interests. And it's always a challenge, as I say, to get this tension between interests and values right. It's why we think so hard and so long about many of the decisions that we take. But I was proud. I was proud of U.S. foreign policy. I was proud of the work that we did. I was proud of the work that we did in every one of the countries I served. And I can point to countless stories of how we made a difference. And as I say, no one's perfect and no nation's perfect. But I have no regrets about the service, and I hope that our nation will continue to be that beacon in the world. We've had a rough few years, but I look forward to the future.
Awesome, sir. So look like you have such a good Midwest value. Everybody wants to go to send their kids to school in Minnesota because this is such a good school system. So probably you are product of that, core. So it lead me to the next question. So how do you think our new president, President Biden's foreign policy in Nepal versus President Trump policy is going to impact Nepal pretty much? Or what's your take here?
I don't think under President Trump there was, and I say this respectfully, I don't think there was a lot of thought given to Nepal necessarily. And I don't think from administration to administration, there's a lot of thought given to Nepal. And I don't mean to diminish Nepal. What I mean is that Nepal is not going to be at the center of foreign policy deliberations for the United States, right? So instead, Nepal is going to both, I would argue, benefit from that fundamental commitment of the United States to engage the world in this constructive way founded upon our values and our beliefs. And no matter what each administration may be doing about, oh, our allies should pay more, we should be doing this, or yeah, we aren't going to fuss about these human rights. When it came to Nepal, largely the American ambassador in Nepal, working in partnership with colleagues in the State Department, usually career professionals, and working with the assistant secretary appointed by the president and up the chain as needed, were the ones who largely shaped our engagement. And not, so whether the president was thinking a lot about Nepal or not, Nepal still got that focused attention from those for whom it was the responsibility to be caring about this part of South Asia. And in that sense, I think there's been great consistency overall from administration to administration. I don't think for Nepal, things change that dramatically from Obama to Trump to Biden. And I don't think that they'll change all that much. We will remain a committed partner to Nepal. That's what we have been for years. We want to see Nepal prosper. It's not as though we look and say, oh, we want this and that from Nepal. We want Nepal to do all these different things. We don't. We just want Nepal to succeed. We want the people of Nepal to have a good future. We want to see the nation grow and the economy grow and to be part of the community of nations, to see this experiment in a federal democratic republic succeed. We want to see stability and hope. We want to see people's lives get better. And if Nepal is a success, if Nepal is democratic, if it is prosperous, if it respects the rights of its people, we think that's wonderful for Nepal. At least I believe it would be.
Yeah. So
and we think that's wonderful for the United States. That's what we want.
So in the same time, sir, right now, see, the time has shifted. And right now you see South Asia, especially Asia, is growing very fast. And I have lived in China, I've lived in India, Nepal, and now US. I feel that you see in the world horizon, the South Asia especially has, and especially Asia Pacific, a very important role, how going to play in the future. So, and also Nepal being between two biggest countries and big population, they're emerging as a power. Do you see that Nepal can play a really big role in balancing the relation between India, China, USA, and all other nations, and can be it is being the land of peace, land of Buddha. It can play such a big role because United States and Nepal established the relationship in 1948, and it has been US has been one of the biggest donor for the Nepal's development through the several organization. So how do you see it's going to evolve? Because I understand that before there was not much interest about Nepal's role, but now you see that Nepal is between China and India. They are both growing. It can play a good role.
Jay, I think it's a good question, and I've had other people posit this. Why can't Nepal play this important role in being a bridge between these countries and all the rest? But in today's world, I would say to you that first of all, relations between nations are no longer dictated. The influence of our geographic location in the world and the boundaries of our borders are not the sole determinant of how we engage, right? Or who we engage with. The world is a much bigger place, and barriers have broken down, and geographic boundaries are there, and they do play a role, but our engagement far transcends our geographic borders in the world that we live in today. Now, for Nepal, you're positioned, between India and China, and you've got a good relationship with the United States, and you're absolutely right. The US has been a major donor for years and continues to be, and we will continue to play that role in Nepal, I believe. I would be very surprised if we did not. So could Nepal play a different role in helping to create the environment for peace and building these bridges? Theoretically, yes, you could make that case, but first, leaders of Nepal have to commit themselves to Nepal playing that sort of a role. They have to stop thinking of themselves as a yam between two boulders and shaping their choices and their decisions about how currying the favor of either India or China will affect their own political fortunes, and start thinking about the broader world. To me, one of the great challenges of Nepal, you talked about the growth of South Asia and its growing role in the world, and I agree with you, and Asia as a whole. But Nepal, when I was there, has remained still so insular in how they engage. I mean, you would talk to Nepalis, nobody talked about the challenges in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Nobody talked about that conflict. People talked about India and China, but only insofar as it affected, Nepal and their relationship. And as I say, usually who was going to be in power or not in power, or how we can get the Chinese to support us. We'll play the China card against India and vice versa. And that sort of approach to politics and international affairs does not put you in a position to play a role at truly bridging and being an international partner who's taken seriously. And I think it's time for a shift in the mentality about Nepal is not defined just by being stuck between India and China. And Nepal can play a broader role in the world, and its voice can be heard, and it's got a contribution to make, and its economic impact can be broader than just in the region too. Because again, world economies are changing. You know, the internet economy, the online economy. There are so many ways that Nepal can play a different role. But I don't know that Nepal's leaders have focused on these things yet, and I think that's a question for maybe the next generation. Yeah, maybe we are reaching a point where inevitably generational change will have to happen. And I know there's a great resistance at times to letting that younger generation take the reins of leadership and power. But by virtue of the calendar, if nothing else, guys like me, we're getting old, you know, and sooner or later, you do have to step out of the scene. And so I hope that that next generation of leaders in Nepal in particular will see the world a little differently. Will be ready to face the challenges of this century instead of fighting some of the internal political battles of the last. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Right, just say that's, so just say for second generation, like American Nepali here in US, we have second generation coming up.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to engage, let's say more Nepali engage in American politics or even city level, there you see some of the mayors are Nepali Americans now. So what do you see? Just say somebody, just say like Pooja wants to work for the State Department. How she can get the job there?
Same way I did, take a test. Man, I mean, this is the thing though, Jay, and you're absolutely right. And I hope we will see so I work with I've worked with the Nepali diaspora communities in many different states and across the country in the past few years, and it's been really interesting to me. But many of those communities are still rooted in Nepal, right? You know, the older generation in particular, and they still identify with, you know, I'm a Madeshi, I'm this, I'm a Rai, I'm Gurung, I'm this party, I'm that party. You know, they've all got their identification, but they've got to make that transition to saying, I'm an American, and I'm an American of Nepali heritage, but that doesn't mean I'm a Nepali of, you know, I'm a Nawari American, I'm a Nepali American. And both how we think about engaging Nepal has to be as engaging Nepal, not just going back to our roots in one community or one village or anything else, and how we engage in America. And I see this with the younger generation of Nepali Americans who are looking at this and who are part of our society. I mean, they're Americans. You know, I mean, we hyphenate it. Yeah, I'm an Italian American. Yeah, you're a Nepali American. But at the core, we're all Americans. This is our country. It's our society. We want to engage, but we do need that. And I think that we are a nation of immigrants. And I know that the Italian roots, my grandparents came from Sicily. And that the cultural values, the norms, the experiences, the foods, every bit of it has become is also part of my American experience, right? And I want to share that with my kids and my grandkids still. So we all remain, we keep our identities, but we do this as that broader American community. So I hope that we will now see more and more young Nepalis starting to emerge and play roles in our society that are truly noteworthy, that we'll see them becoming members of Congress, that we will see them as playing roles in city government, that we'll see them as leaders in business and communities and all the rest, just like anybody else. And I think that's going to happen. And I will just say as a side note, I would absolutely love to have more young Nepalis who are willing to work with us at Engage Nepal. Yeah, we need that kind of support. We need board members. We need people who are committed, who can help us to make that difference and to offer us their views on where we should focus ourselves. Because again, there's never one simple answer.
Yeah, so this is a very good segue to what I wanted to ask about Engage Nepal.
Sure.
So how young Nepalese can reach out to the organization if they want to contribute? And
Info at engagenepal.org is our email address, or scott.delisi at engagenepal.org. Email me. Go to our website, but actually email is still always, probably a better tool. I'm on Facebook. People message me all the time on Facebook, and a lot of it is, my personal page ends up being half the time about Engage Nepal, and that's okay. Because if people find it easiest to reach us that way, I'm happy to talk with them. I'm happy to chat with people on the phone as time permits. Again, as I've told you, we're a small organization. I've got a few volunteers, both Nepali American and non-Nepali Americans on the board. We've got about 5 board members right now who really care, but they've all got lives. They're all volunteering their time. And so we're always looking for folks with ideas who can energize communities, who can help us to build a base of support. And, I'm happy to have them reach out, and I answer my emails. I answer my phone. We're willing to do this. I will say that we are now 5 years old. Most nonprofits fail within the first 5 years. It's hard. And it's hard to find the resources in particular to sustain our engagement. But we haven't failed. And each year we've raised a little bit more. We've been able to do more in the field. We've been able to touch more lives. And we try to do this in a very, we don't have offices in Nepal. We don't have a bunch of Pajero, 4-wheel drives running around the countryside with our sticker on the side telling people how to do things. We work with partners in Nepal, partners who have the trust of their communities, who know their needs, but equally partners who are committed to transparency and accountability. Because that, to me, it's got to be the hallmark of what we do. We can't continue every time there's a crisis in Nepal to say, oh, well, I'm raising money for this one village. And oh yeah, I'm going to send it out, send it to my brother-in-law in the village, and he'll distribute the funds. Nobody ever knows where that money goes. Nobody ever knows if it has an impact, and maybe it does. I don't mean to, I don't want to be unfair here, but it's haphazard and it's not focused, and there's no structure or thought to a coordinated approach. And if we're going to truly have an impact, we need to be thinking more. And I'm not saying that we are the only way to do these things, but I'd like to believe that we can be a platform for us to all engage and compare notes and to work together. We've been working, for example, during the pandemic with groups like Nepal Rises and other Nepali American organizations. We've worked together. Because combining our resources, we're able to have a greater impact in terms of purchasing PPE or some of the necessary equipment, or setting up a model COVID response program for a community that others can look at again and say, oh, that's something we have to consider doing. So we've got a lot going on. There's a lot more we can do. And we're looking for partners all the time. So if people have ideas and want to offer their energy or even just their Facebook platform to help spread the word, all of it matters.
Of course. Actually, I like the point that you raised, Mr. DeLisi, there, that I see people are willing to donate, but sometimes, like you said, like my brother-in-law in some village is gonna, distribute the fund or whatever. And in that case, people have like hard time kind of ensuring that the funds they have provided is going to actually serve the people in need. Yeah. So how Engage Nepal is ensuring that the funds goes to the right needy people?
Well, this is, to me, I'd say one of the advantages of having been the ambassador is I was very much aware of the risks of this. I've we look very closely and carefully at the partners that we choose to deal with. And we have occasionally worked with just communities that, you know, it's a little haphazard, but where we've have a degree of confidence that people are going to be work with us in the right way, again, with accountability and transparency. And when we do that, I will say that we are cautious in how much we invest initially. We look for the communities to also put money and a commitment on the table. We insist nicely, but we insist on reporting and on receipts. And we want to see documentation that this money has been well spent, and we get it. And we can, listen, I can give you the name. You know, when we help Anushka Shrestha, you know, in Solsing village, you know, this remote village, and the kids couldn't go to secondary school because it was too far, right? The secondary school was a 4-hour walk. They can't walk 4 hours each way every day, but their families were too poor for the kids to board. Those kids are going to school. And I know, not only do we know the kids are going to school and we got the pictures and the receipts and the documentation, but I know their names. They wrote us letters telling us how they're going to be great citizens of Nepal and how appreciative they are. When we support a women's entrepreneurship program in Bharatnagar, and I can go to Bharatnagar and I sit with the women and I look at a woman who says to me, "Excellency, you know, I used to wait for my husband to go to India and maybe he would be able to send home the money for our daughter's school fees." She said, "Now I pay the school fees." The pride, the dignity of earning, of setting that example for her daughter, saying, "This is what I can do," because somebody believed in her idea, the idea of this community of women, and they just needed a little help. And we had local partners, and we matched what the local partners were doing to make this dream that they had of entrepreneurship a reality. And we transformed their lives. And we can report this back to our donors. We put these things on our webpage. We are following closely. Right now, we are supporting, there were 3,000 kids in Shankaripur municipality, about 30 kilometers, about 30 miles outside of Kathmandu, who during the pandemic, their parents were casual laborers, right? And they lost their jobs during the pandemic. Very little land. You know, they aren't able to grow much to even sustain the family. We had kids who were severely malnourished. We had families that couldn't buy warm clothes for their kids during the winter months. We had kids who weren't going to be able to continue their online schooling or anything else. And especially with the girls, if we lose them to education, we lose them. And they're going to end up in early marriages, or they're going to end up trafficked. We know this is going to happen. We see it again and again. But we're working with HomeNet Nepal, a really solid organization, and they had a plan. Yeah, we've got a good plan. And they send me the receipts and they send me the photos, and I see these kids in their warm sweaters that they didn't have a day before who are just beaming. Yeah, and the kids who for the next 2 months are going to get the nutritional supplements that are going to make a difference for them, and the kids who are staying in school. And so, you know, can I guarantee that every penny always gets spent exactly right? I want to say yes. And I believe the answer is yes. Yeah, but I've been in the world long enough. I mean, there's always problems. But will I tell you that in 5 years, have I yet encountered anything that I have seen, and I look closely because I know if I'm asking someone to contribute to our organization, I feel a responsibility, a personal responsibility to that person to do everything that I can, at least, to ensure that that money is well spent and that it's not lost. And we've had a pretty damn good track record, and I'm proud of it.
Sure. Thank you very much for that. It means a lot, actually. And to all our listeners, whoever is listening right now, you just heard what Mr. DeLisi said. And if you are willing to donate to his organization, please, can you give some information, Mr. DeLisi, how they can?
Sure. You know, again, on my Facebook page, I've got fundraisers all the time, but www.engagenepal.org. That's our webpage. There are links there. And on the page, yeah, and I will confess, and I apologize to your listeners, it's not always every bit as current as it could be, because largely it's me doing a lot of this stuff. So trying to update the page and keep everything current is always a challenge, but I do try. But there's plenty of information on that page, and it highlights a number of our major projects. It highlights what we're doing right now in the effort against the pandemic. And that's what, for the past year, you know, we've had to shift our gears and focus largely on pandemic response, because it's a crisis. This is like the earthquake. This is every bit as devastating to Nepal as those earthquakes were. And everybody said, oh my God, with the earthquakes, how can we help? We don't get that same outpouring of support with this pandemic, but this is a silent earthquake that is just as devastating to the society. In fact, maybe more so in terms of the breadth of the economic impact. But so the information is on our webpage. There are links to donate on the webpage. We have a program that I would just mention. They can look for it on the page. It's called Champions for Nepal. There, some people say to me, you know, Excellency, it's really great what you're doing, but you know, we're immigrants. You know, I can't write you a check for $500 or anything like that. I said, that's okay, and I get that. But can you do $10? Can you do $10 a month? Do you go into Starbucks and buy a couple of lattes during the course of a month? Do you go to McDonald's? You know, we drop 10 bucks at the drop of a hat. If I had 1,000 people across the country who gave just $10 a month, it would be transformational. That would not only cover all of our expenses, but we would start every year with $50,000, $60,000 in our pocket to begin projects in the field before we did any other fundraising. So we ask our Champions for Nepal to sign up and give 10 bucks a month. Some people give 20. Some people, I've got a couple of folks who give 100 a month. God bless them. But we still don't have the equivalent of 1,000 people. That's 20 people per state across the US. If I could get that, I'd consider myself a lucky man, and Nepal would benefit. But so we do have programs like that where people can give monthly. We have programs where you can give once, you can give twice, you can set it up to do it annually or every 6 months, whatever you want. We've got our different projects. What we ask is that people engage, that they care, that we open our hearts and our wallets. We get a lot of folks who think it's great to see us engage Nepal. But transforming our compassion, we see the problem and we recognize it and we say, oh my God, that's really terrible. How can we help? But to take that step from saying, how can we help, to actually helping, that's the big one. Definitely. And for a lot of folks, they say, oh yeah, that's really great what they're doing, but it doesn't lead them to say, and I'm going to send 50 bucks, or I'm going to do $5 a month. I'll settle for 5. I'd like 50, but I'll settle for 5. But it's that decision to transform your compassion into action. That's what we're looking for.
That's awesome. And a lot of that. That's very good information. We are almost at the end of the program.
Okay.
And sir, Your Excellency, you got the partner now. We are Radio Nepali USA going to promote you. You are going to be a media partner. We are going to take this cause and going to repeat in our radio, and we'll in future definitely we'll do something to do something for Engage Nepal. So I have a couple of questions from our listeners.
All right.
One question is, it says in American policy, because also just like corporate America, whenever this big corporate America try to go around the world to build their organization, they go to regional wise. They go Asia Pacific, they go Europe, they go Middle East. In the same way, in South Asia, is that true? When American foreign policy is kind of designed, it is go through the lens of India or China to dictate the policy in Nepal?
No, I will tell you. And I had that question when I was ambassador in Nepal. All I can tell you is that certainly during my time as ambassador, people thought that, we must be looking at Nepal through the Indian prism. We did not. We looked at Nepal as our partner, as our friend. Some issues I would consult with and work with my Indian partner. Other times the Indian ambassador and I disagreed 100% about what we wanted to do and what we believed was the right course. We make the decision that we believe as America is best in America's interest, America's policy, and we look at Nepal as Nepal, not as an adjunct of India or China or anybody else.
That's wonderful. So my last question is, sir, I very, like in a few years back, I was listening President Obama, one of these comment speech somewhere in his Europe or Asia trip. He said that the best export of America is American democracy, American federalism. So a lot of people get confused. Is that still the true sense of American policy, sir? We want to export the rule of law, like a democracy. Everybody has a chance, just like to grow and be happy. If the world is prosperous, America is prosperous. America is also happy, because everything, whatever happens in either a corner of Tapalejung or somewhere in Mexico or somewhere in Uganda, it affects the whole world. So what do you say about this? Last message to our Nepali listeners.
I believe that will be the message of the Biden administration as well. I believe that the core values that have shaped the United States engagement in the world for decades will be the same values that we see articulated going forward. And yes, I'm not naive. I know in the last 4 years, there have been people who've questioned that. I'm not going to dwell on the last 4 years. I'm going to tell you that going forward, I believe that we will return to that commitment to a rule of law, to doing the right thing, to respecting human rights, human decency, and that we will care. That's the bottom line, that we will care. We always have, we will.
Thank you for your time, Your Excellency. You are so kind and gracious that you gave me this appointment very quickly. And thank you for making this today. And definitely the Nepal listener will enjoy it, and the whole Nepali diaspora. Thank you again. We'll be reach out to you again and again for future interviews. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Namaste.
It was a pleasure talking with both of you and with your listeners. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.